Hey Thumbers, welcome to another review from Hyper RPG. We are here to do a review of the series finale of Star Wars Rebels.
I mean,
oh man.
Yeah, we did a trailer reaction of the season 4 trailer, so I figure this is a perfect way to bookend it. Adam.
Absolutely. We got a chance to go see it at Disney on Monday, so we got to see it early, right before, or
on
Friday.
Yeah, before it aired on Monday.
It is.
It's
exactly.
okay. It's the weeks. The days are complicated.
We do so much stuff. It all just bleeds together. But this was pretty cool. We got to go. There was a cast and crew Q&A.
There was.
Dave Filoni was there. The primary cast was there, except for Freddie Prinze Jr., who obviously came in. He perished. I think was it like 2 or 3 episodes before?
Yeah, he died in the premiere of the second half of this season. So it was like 2 weeks ago now, or 3 weeks ago.
And then we got to see the final 3 episodes, which the third to last episode was very much its own episode. And then the way it's screened, the last 2 episodes were basically one big giant one.
Yeah, they didn't even give us like a title card in between the last 2. They literally aired them back to back in such a way that if I didn't know that they were 2 episodes, I would have had no idea that they were 2 separate episodes.
No, because we get to that epilogue piece and I was like, wait a second, what? This is the end already?
Yeah.
What was your initial reaction? Well, first of all, going into it, what were you kind of hoping to see, expecting to see? And coming out of it, what were your feelings about the finale?
I think for me, I was going into it in a way that I was hoping they'd explain. I'm not one of those people that needs it to be absolutely explained to me why these characters had little to no impact on the original Star Wars trilogy, why we never saw them, why they quote unquote never existed. But I'm not one of those people that needed it all to end in doom and gloom in order to basically I didn't need to have a total player kill to
Rogue One, a rebel story.
Exactly. And I think that, one of the things that something that Dave Filoni brought up in the Q&A that people kind of forget about Star Wars is that, the reason you liked Star Wars so much when you were a kid is it did have a happy ending.
Yep.
So I think for me, I just wanted the storylines to be tied up in a way that was satisfying and justified more or less why we didn't see these characters in the original trilogy. And I thought that it did an excellent job of that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think going into it, I was at a weird place because I feel like, or at least originally, my stance on it was, well, if these characters never appear in the original trilogy, then they shouldn't be allowed to survive. Because if they do survive, then people are just going to continually ask questions. Where are they? Why weren't they here? Why weren't they there? What does this mean for the original trilogy? How does it change anything? What does it mean for the sequel trilogy? Does it influence or change anything there? But as this 3-episode arc really started to unravel, and we get to a point where I'm starting to realize I don't feel like all these characters are going to perish.
Yeah.
I think this is going to end in a different way than I was anticipating. Then once we get to that ending, and Ezra's story, it's wrapped up in a satisfying way, but they didn't feel a need to have to necessarily show us his death on screen.
Right.
Kanan goes in a very, very heroic, almost, I was making jokes about Jean Grey sort of.
Totally.
X-Men 2
oh,
ending,
yeah.
Phoenix,
oh,
the Dark
definitely.
Phoenix ending, which I thought was awesome. And then seeing all the other characters, I was really satisfied when we get to the end and you see these characters.
I totally agree.
And there is a narration, and the narration explains that these characters made it through the Battle of Endor. They made it through the original trilogy. Where are they now in the universe? It's not really important.
Yeah.
And it's more about what journey did they go on and what did they learn about themselves and about working as a team, which I think is so much more important than where were they during episode 4, 5, and 6.
I totally agree with you on that, Adam. And I think that, the fact that the epilogue, they basically did a time jump to after Return of the Jedi.
Which was so cool.
It just blew my mind.
You see Sabine and you're like, wait, what?
I was not expecting that at all. And I think the fact that they did that and they had that narration with Sabine where she says, we decimated the Imperial blockade on Lothal and we waited on Lothal because we thought, all right, the Empire's gonna strike back.
Right.
And then they never did.
Yeah. Yeah. And they talk about and Dave Filoni, I believe it was Dave Filoni talking about how the attention of the Emperor changes after the Battle of Lothal. They thought that the Empire was going to come and invade and potentially try to win the planet back. But as soon as sort of the emergence of the Battle of Scarif and then going into Luke Skywalker's story, his attention completely shifts because he realizes, oh, there's an even greater threat because now this puts, Darth Vader's this puts the story of Darth Vader in a real place of danger, because now Luke Skywalker can come in and really influence what happens with the Empire. So that's why the Emperor's real, everything about his mission changes. So I think that perfectly explains, why these characters were not featured in the original trilogy, like their story, what their purpose
Absolutely.
was, and how they liberate Lothal, like a beautiful, beautiful ending.
Totally.
To that series,
and I liked too that in this, that, Ezra did get to have his moment where he overcame the Emperor. I mean, I was
that scene.
I was talking on AfterBuzz with Mary Elizabeth McGlynn about this, and how we were talking about who does the voice of Governor Price. And she was saying that she felt like it was in that moment where Ezra decided, no, I loved my real family, but they're gone.
Yeah.
And I can't change the fact that they're gone. It's already happened. I have to go with the flow of time. That was the moment that Ezra really became a Jedi.
Yeah, it's acceptance.
And because the thing is, and it also shows tremendous growth on the part of the character of Ezra, because 2 seasons ago, Ezra would not have made that decision.
No.
But now he has matured into this better person. And a lot of that, of course, was really solidified in one of the previous episodes in World Between Worlds, in his interactions with Ahsoka, when he chose not to intervene in the moment where Kanan saved everybody. It's just so important. And this idea that really resonates throughout Rebels of a family, and that a family is not necessarily the people who you are related to by blood.
Right.
That the people who you choose to make your family are every bit as important and as much a part of your family as the people who actually gave birth to you.
Exactly. And then, and that was sort of that was sort of the thing that really carried Ezra through a lot of Rebels. And I think once we time jumped in season 3, I think it allowed that series to sort of mature on its own, but still was about the very, very simple dynamic of family and what it meant to be a part of that 4 or 5 person team, and how they would bring all these other characters along the way. I mean, they had characters who would jump from the Empire back to the Rebellion. And I thought that was so cool to allow these characters to really have an evolution. Yeah. So by the end of it, when you get to the finale of this story and you see Ezra make the ultimate sacrifice to save his family, this really is his family. It's a beautiful sort of bow tie to that series and what it means. And then seeing Ahsoka Tano and Sabine go off on an adventure that we may never know what happens.
We might never see it, but
it's so amazing. I love the fact that I can interpret that any way I want.
I do too, because, and also this is one of the first times, if not actually the first time, that on screen we've seen anything beyond Return of the Jedi, but before Force Awakens.
Yep.
Obviously, there's novels and comics that explore that time period, but not any films as of yet.
No.
And so, people have strongly theorized that the next animated series will take place during that time period. Yeah. And this is certainly set up in such a way that if you wanted to do an animated series about Sabine and Ahsoka's journey into, the unknown regions, into deep space, to try and find wherever the Purgle took Ezra, you could definitely do that. But at the same time, if we don't, that's also okay.
Totally.
I think that there's this tendency that people want to see, and I somewhat blame Disney for it, because Disney at this point is definitely trying to cover every single corner and moment of Star Wars canon, but you don't need to see everything.
You don't.
There's a lot to be said for leaving stuff up to the imagination. 100%. And I think that the storyline of Rebels wrapped up in a very satisfying way, wherein, yes, we could absolutely tell that story of Sabine and Ahsoka. Would I consume it in whatever form it comes out in? Absolutely. I adore both of those characters. Yeah. But if we never do, people are going to write great fan fiction about it.
Exactly. And I think that's part of the danger. And that was sort of my worry going into the finale of Rebels, was I almost hope that it ties it up, only because I don't want them to be like, now we're going to make a comic book series, and now we're going to make a video game, which is like, yes, I would be absolutely 100% stoked and excited about it if we got to see the further adventures of Sabine and Ahsoka, of Jason Syndulla and Hera, of what happens to Rex, and all these. I think it would be so fun. Yeah. But I do love the mystery aspect about it, and I think that's what was cool about the original trilogy. Whether or not their plan was to end after Return of the Jedi, the further adventures of those characters, yes, they were explored in books and in comics and all that stuff. But if you just knew Star Wars from the movies, you could kind of conceptualize your own sort of
It's a complete
history.
It's a complete story. And is everything 100% resolved? No. But is it wrapped up in a satisfying conclusion to the story that was told over the course of the original trilogy? Yeah, absolutely. Totally. And I think that Rebels did a fantastic job of that as well.
Yeah, and I think for me it was very satisfying the way that they told it. I think if it would have been told in any other way, I think just everything just hit the mark so well.
It really did.
And for me, that ending comes, and I just sat there sort of going, wow, I didn't think that a series could wrap itself up in such a satisfying way, especially knowing that a lot of these characters survive.
Right.
And I don't walk out of it going, well, I wanted all these questions
well,
answered, damn it.
It didn't make sense that they weren't involved in this thing. It's like,
Right.
no.
It doesn't matter.
I mean,
the universe is huge.
The character that survived that was most surprising to me was Callus.
Yeah.
And he had one of my favorite endings.
Yeah, he did. Absolutely. Like him and Zeb, like, what a pair.
I know.
What a pair.
I know.
love
They
those
got
two
a happy
characters.
ending.
And I mean, I think we all knew going into this that, like, okay, Hera is 100% going to survive.
Right, we knew that.
Because of the movies and Rogue One and all that sort of stuff.
And
You're like,
the Forces of Destiny shorts.
exactly.
Yeah.
You're not gonna go into the thing like, well, now they have to kill her, they can't kill her,
Right.
which was fine. That's totally fine with me. But seeing a lot of these other characters survive, I'm like, man, I originally had a feeling that Callus was going to be one of the first ones to go in the finale.
Yeah.
And lives all the way through. And I'm like,
I know.
I can't be mad about it because they do tie up everyone's storyline so well. And they obviously leave things open. But the one thing that I'm curious is if we will ever see Ahsoka Tano, whether it be a movie.
I know.
Or maybe a comic book series or whatever it's going to be. But overall, I think just very, very satisfying. And I can't wait to see what they do next. And if it is something that's set in post Return of the Jedi, that's 32 years of storytelling potentially.
Oh, yeah.
And by saying that, I don't mean that I need it to be completely tied into what happens in The Force Awakens.
No.
It can totally be its own thing in another part of the universe with brand new characters.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think it's completely valid. I don't think it needs to tie into
Well,
Force
and I
Awakens.
think too that if you do go on that, because I mean, Dave Filoni says in the Rebels Recon episode that follows the finale, series finale of Star Wars Rebels, that Ezra and Thrawn definitely lived.
Yeah.
They are definitely alive. Where they are, unclear.
knows?
And so, you've set yourself up for a story that potentially takes place in the unknown. And
Yeah.
so that would perfectly explain why this has no particular impact on Force Awakens
Exactly.
and Last Jedi, et cetera, et cetera.
Plus, what's cool is, Thrawn, when we meet him in the original sort of canon, it's post episode 6 anyway.
Right, exactly.
So the fact that this character kind of goes into this mysterious unknown sometime right before episode 6 and then potentially reemerges again after is like,
I mean, we
hey, man.
don't 100% know, I don't think, when the new Thrawn Alliances novel takes place.
Yeah.
It's very possible that he gets out of wherever the Purgle, the space whales took him before Return of the Jedi even happens. We just don't know at this point. And that's okay. I am definitely somebody that, like, when a story ends for me, it's almost more satisfying if there are some threads that are still left untied, because that's more like real life.
Exactly.
Real life doesn't get wrapped up in a perfect little bow.
No, it doesn't. Plus, I think the thing that I also appreciate so much about not just the series finale of Rebels, the last 3 episodes, but Rebels in general, the way that Dave Filoni talks about the Force and how it's embraced by more than just human-like creatures or aliens.
Right.
It's animals, and it's like so many more things than just like Jedi.
The use of the Force and nature in Rebels is a big recurring theme, and you see it a lot with the animals, particularly in this season with the Loth Wolves, who end up playing a huge part in the final battle, so to speak, and it was violent.
Yeah,
I was like, can they do this on a kid show?
Damn, you guys are like You're not showing anything extremely graphic in terms of blood, but man, people are getting chomped up by those things.
They sure are. This show is rated Y7, everybody. But that, there is this big connection between Ezra and nature and the Force itself, and this idea that, the Jedi are people who just kind of go with the Force. They accept that the Force is all around them, and they go where it takes them. Whereas the Sith are trying to use the Force and bend it to their will instead of just going with it and benefiting from it. Thusly, they're like, no, this is this power and I want to use it for selfish reasons.
Exactly. And I think that's what's so cool. And it reminded me a lot of the same feeling I get whenever I watch Yoda and Luke on Dagobah.
Yeah.
The training sequences. And to me, Empire Strikes Back, that particular part of that movie, to me, nails so well what I've sort of come to accept as what the Force is, what it represents, how it can affect characters, good and bad. And I think Dave Filoni, again, just hearing him talk about it, he really nails it.
He just
to me,
gets
that's
it.
like, for me, definitively, Rebels and Empire and even Clone Wars to a certain extent, they really do a great job defining of what the Force really means.
Sure.
And if there's anything that I would like to see carried over from Rebels into the feature films and potential live action series, it's that. It's what does the Force represent? What does it mean? And how does it affect characters good and bad? And even story-wise, what does it do for the story? Like, that to me is so satisfying. And it completely, I don't want to say changes, but it really, again, defines what that means in terms of the Star Wars lore, and it's so satisfying.
Absolutely. And I think that one of the things that Dave Filoni really does particularly well, as you say, is he has this deep understanding of the Force so that Ezra's journey feels so completely different than Luke's journey.
Yes.
100%. Ezra's journey feels much more sort of organic, and it's something that he's learning as he goes along. And I mean, some of that is by virtue of the fact that he has Kanan as a teacher who doesn't really want to be a teacher, thinks he's a bad teacher, and then finally, of course, comes full circle and he's actually a very good teacher, and he really does connect with Ezra. But I think that, the thing about Star Wars is that the Force is always going to be part of it, but I think what you show with Rebels is that you can tell this very compelling story where the Force is just part of it.
Yes.
It's not at the center of it by any means.
No.
Because at the center of this story is this idea of a family. And whether you're into Star Wars or not, this is just really good storytelling and something that I think anybody can connect with on a personal level.
100%. And I think what they said, what the cast said, and what Dave Filoni said about this show very much being about family. And yes, it's a quote unquote kids show because it's animated. But it's more than that. It's really about what I think the original trilogy is about. It is about family dynamics and teamwork.
Yeah.
And that is what Rebels does so extremely well. And I think that's why audiences of all ages have really embraced it.
Absolutely.
And I think the same thing kind of goes for Clone Wars as well. But I think now because Rebels hits it even harder with family dynamics, I think that's why people love it so much. And it really, truly is. And I was turned off by it mostly because it was animated. Because even though I really do enjoy animation, I tend to look at it more as sort of a kid-friendly piece of content. But no, I was completely wrong. Like, Rebels does such a great job bringing emotion, bringing heart, humor, basically anything and everything that Star Wars has embraced since the original trilogy. And it's just such a great show. Very, very satisfying. I couldn't be happier with the way it turns out.
Do not share the same biases about animation that Adam does, because I watch a lot of anime and a lot of that is not for children. But this is absolutely family friendly.
Oh, 100%.
But I wouldn't say it is for kids.
It doesn't talk down to anybody.
No, it's for everybody. And yes, there are those moments where it's kind of silly kid humor. Sure. It happens, but it's few and far between. And overall, it's just a really good story. And in some ways, when you are, restricted by that Y7 rating and you want to make this family friendly, you actually have to get a little more creative with your storytelling in order to make that emotional impact, because you can't just resort to, well, everybody dies or there's gratuitous sex and violence.
Yep.
You have to find other ways to reach your audience, and Star Wars Rebels definitely does that. Yep. I sobbed through the whole ending.
Well, that's the first thing we talked about when we left the theater, was because you are restricted by the Y7, it forces you to ground the characters even more.
Yes.
And it forces you to really have layers and layers and layers with the characters. And I think that's why there are a lot of animated series. We talked about Batman the Animated Series being another one of those things where because you have a certain rating that you have to meet, it forces you to really create dynamic and deep characters. And again, that to me is one of the strengths of Star Wars Rebels.
Absolutely.
Hugely.
Absolutely.
But guys, please let us know in the comments below what you thought about not only the series finale of Star Wars Rebels, but the series in general. Where would you like to see Dave Filoni and his team take Star Wars next, whether it's live action or animation? Where would you like it to go? And how do you feel about how it wrapped up certain character stories? And even some fan fiction. Like, I love to hear, some fan fiction of where you think Ahsoka Tano and Sabine ended up.
Send us those
or
Ahsoka
Hera
Sabine theories.
I'd love to know.
And all of your Callus Zeb fan fictions.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. In the meantime, Emma, where can everybody find you on the internet?
You can find me all over the internet at my name, Emma Fyffe, EMMAFYFFE. Also, if you guys like really good Star Wars stories about original characters, you should totally check out Pencils and Parsecs, the Star Wars RPG that we do here at Hyper RPG over on our Twitch channel. Wednesdays at 8:00 p.m. Pacific. That is twitch.tv/hyperrpg.
God damn, that's a good old plug.
Thanks, man.
And you can just find me on Hyper Heroes every single week and on Cineverse with Cameron and Elizabeth talking about the movies. And we'll catch you in the next review.